Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for the 27th in a 34-ish kind of part series as we journey chapter by chapter through Fairy Tale by Stephen King. We have a So What Happened section, a Lit Crit section, and finally a Writers section for this video. We are at sort of a strange place in the novel. There are almost always short chapters before the culmination of an action-based novel where things sort of come to a head so that they may split off. That is where we find ourselves. If you like this sort of thing, it really does me a lot of good if you decide to hit that like button. If you're here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you want to hear me talk about philosophy and other types of writing, there is a link to my personal channel to be found in the description below. So what happened here? The formal royalty and Charlie are having a meeting in the aftermath of their departure. They're having a meeting in the same little wooden place that Radar and Charlie hid the night before they entered the city. They're having a meeting because the Moons and Flight Killer and the Dark Well and you know all that stuff. Charlie, it turns out, has to kill everyone by the next night. But all the while that they are having this discussion, Leah is visibly disturbed. Eventually, she gets up, huffs and puffs, and leaves, apparently because she still misses Eldon, who had become Flight Killer. So she misses the person that Eldon had been. Eldon was her real friend, then turned into Flight Killer. Despite Flight Killer's turn, Leah loves the man that had been, so her facing the prospect of losing Eldon, who she does not believe is Flight Killer. She thinks Eldon probably a prisoner somewhere-ish, maybe, sort of. Probably. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? The story goes that when he was still Eldon, he was picked on a lot. He was picked on by everyone, by men and women alike. Surprise. And that is why he had such a nasty disposition. They go to sleep. Everybody goes to sleep except for the people who had been prisoners. They stay up and talk with Charlie, and in the early morning light, the group sees Leah leaving, dressed to kill. Not fashion-wise, but she has pants and a sword. She is wearing that sort of thing. Charlie intercepts her on her way to the city and convinces her that they should go together. So, in the lit crit portion of this discussion, I want to start here, because I think that there are several things on a sort of meta level that are really worth discussing at this point. Number one, is anyone having trouble with all of these names? I think probably, of course you are. At least one or two have given you a hang-up until you start reading what the person is doing for a few blocks and realize, oh, yeah, right. Woody's the guy that we spent the night with. Couldn't see all this stuff. Here's the reason why. This book is not 3 acts. It's 3 separate books. You have the story of Charlie, the guy who found an old man in need and who had nursed him back to health until things went awry for that old man. And then he got inheritance. You have that story. Then you have Charlie shows up in a magical new world. And you have that story for a little bit. And then you have Charlie is in prison. You have to have supporting characters for all of these stories all along the way. That's just the way it is. You have to. Otherwise, the story's not going to be very enjoyable. We're not really going to learn anything about these new worlds. Think about it. You have guides every part of the novel. In the first part, you have Bowditch, you have Adrian Bowditch and Radar that are guiding Charlie through this new world. You still have, in that case, Charlie's father, and his friend. I can't remember his friend's name off the top of my head, but you have the friend there as well, and they are helping to explain to us the things that are going on. Now, it's weird that we have to have those characters in order to explain things to us, things that are going on, because this is a first-person narrative. This being a first-person narrative, we could be getting all of those details from Charlie himself. Charlie himself, not really keen on sharing many of these details. Okay, so there's that. And ironically, I had forgotten that friend's name. And then there is a new element to that world, which is the world of Adrian Bowditch. And there's the jeweler that we meet along the way, and there's Christopher Pauli that we meet along the way, and he breaks Christopher Pauli because that's what the hero does, baby. We meet Radar, and we have to understand Radar. We meet the weird neighbor. You forgot about her, didn't you? Okay, so we've got this cast of characters. So what? Well, we move into this new world. Adrian Bowditch is gone. Dad is kind of forgotten. Radar is sort of Radar at that point is a companion, but we don't get a lot of detail from Radar, do we? We have the Dora, we have the Leah, we have Woody, we have all of these people who are coming in and giving us the details of the new world. And then we have the new world, which is the prison. And Kellen gives us details in there, and Iota gives us details in there, and Hamey, you forgot about Hamey too, didn't you? All of these people give us little details along the way and then are cast off. And we already have a couple characters come back. Snub, whatever his name was, the cricket. Okay, cool. We have Radar that comes back. Okay, cool. We have Leah that comes back. Okay, cool. So now we have gone from first act, which was our world, but with new elements, the Adrian Bowditch character and whatnot. New world, which is briefly run through, but still important because we have to have these things. And then we have new world, which is the prison. Okay, so we go from here back to here. And then we're going to go from here back to here. New world. The world of Nunu. Don't Google Nunu. You don't need to Google Nunu. Leave it out of your dating profiles as well. But the new world. Okay, so we have all of this travel in the same book, and nothing has traveled with us. Remember the sports? Charlie was good at sports. So what? Remember Adrian Bowditch and all of his gold. So what? You know, we have all of these elements that just sort of get picked up and laid aside. And I'm going to get into the very big sin there in the writer's portion of this video. But I bring all that up to mention this. Which characters do you like? Who's your favorite character? We have plenty of them. Who's your favorite one? Personally, Kellen. Cool. We got a couple pages of dialogue with Kellen. Kellen was complex and interesting. Kellen did things that were surprising. Kellen was maybe not witty. Certainly he couldn't be any more witty than Stephen King himself, right? That is one of the truest limitations of a writer. But he was interesting. What about Charlie? Do you like Charlie? Charlie's not quite the wet rag that leads us through, I don't know. He's not quite Nick Carraway in The Great Gatsby. He's not that level of wash rag main character. But is he really all that compelling? I don't know. Do you probably, you like, oh, now I'm forgetting the dog's name. What's the dog's name? straight off the top of my head, can't remember, but probably Radar. Probably you like Radar. Why? Because Radar's a dog. Everybody likes dogs, right? Maybe you were interested in Leah. Here's one of the tricky things about this. Leah, to me, is interesting when she's on screen. Why? Because the way Leah was described, I cast her in my mind as the prettiest girl I've ever known. Okay, so when the pretty girl's on screen, you look at her. Nothing Leah has done is otherwise particularly interesting at all. So what is there? Okay, moving on. One of the things I don't understand about the meeting that they are having, as scared as they are to break back into the city, they talk about the night soldiers. Why do the night soldiers scare you? Do you not have access to water? You know that trick. You have that trick. Use that trick. So I don't know. How do we feel about the fact that Eldon was bullied? Is it too obvious? Is it too obvious when we are looking at this from the perspective of a character who is not all that interested in Eldon at all, namely Charlie? After all, Eldon is the best friend of the love interest. Who has time for that? Eldon is the bad guy that we have learned of the entire time we've been in this new world. Who cares who he had been? But just the fact that he was bullied, I mean, is that interesting enough a reason for him to have turned into the thing that he is? After all, you look at the stronger villains, and the stronger villains have some deeper motivation than this. I'm going to name just movie villains for now because they're easier to sort of reference. But Thanos. Thanos from the Avengers. There's too many people, not enough stuff to go around. Got to get rid of some of them. That way the rest of us can survive. Okay, I understand that, and it's rational. Might not be very cool, but it's rational. The Joker. The Joker just wants to watch the world burn. The Joker wants to cause chaos because it's interesting to him. Not the most likable of reasons, but definitely interesting. The big bad in this novel was pushed around as a kid. If it is that Flight Killer ends up being Eldon. Now for textual specific stuff on 486. Woody said, "The snake has been wounded, but still lives. We have to cut off its head before it can renew its poison. And you must lead, Charlie." Number one, where did this come from? Where did we get the urge to go back in and kill Flight Killer? Has this always been the case? Is it because Flight Killer poses the threat of re-emerging from the dark well once more and even more powerful? If that is the case, why has he not done that yet? And the second thing, really, this is all the more powerful that this kingdom had been, that their slave people escaping and taking out a dozen night soldiers hampered the bad kingdom all that far? Okay. I mean, some setup they had. And finally, on 497, this is coming from Charlie. "I was no Disney prince, and maybe that was good. A Disney prince wasn't what the people of Impus needed." This is an interesting and complex series of thoughts. It's not all that complex on the surface, but it is complex when you really think about it and what it means to a modern story reader. Charlie has proven himself to be a rough kind of guy. That's not real cool with the things as they are, man. But you go back one generation of storytelling, one generation back to the cowboys of the westerns, the Clint Eastwood characters, the man with no name. You go back one generation to those stories. That was a very real idea. You go back, if we're going to use the world between movies and novels, comic books, you go back to the original idea behind Thor, for example. That's what Thor had been. Thor was a rough guy. Thor was royalty. I mean, Thor was what had to be. To be rolling these characters out, not just into today's world, but ostensibly from today's world. That's where Charlie is coming from in this story. It could be a very complex storyline to see someone from our world coming into this new world, realizing the nice rainbows and butterflies of our world. Butterflies, maybe I should have left that out for the storytelling purpose and where we are now. The rainbows of our world aren't what it takes to really rule, right? It's not the nice guys. Nice guys finish last. Why? Because they won't slit your throat. Okay? So this could be very complex, watching him come to this awakening. It is an element of this story that I wish we spent more time with, because these are the things that are really explored in literature in order that we don't have to experience them ourselves in order to come to terms with them. That is one of the primary sort of utility, one of the primary utilities behind literature for what it is in the world, right? You only read Beowulf one time before you realize sometimes good guys got to do bad things. And good guys, so bad guys, it depends on where you're watching the story from. But so does good guys, right? And we have sort of, in today's world, lost that assumption. We are all too willing to cast heroes as villains because someone somewhere is worse for the wear that that person existed. It doesn't matter who or how many people that individual helped. We have to castigate. So now, the one writer's note that I have is this. I asked about the characters. I asked about the characters. I asked about, where am I going here? Oh, what characters you liked. Yeah, it was the characters twice. What characters do you remember and what characters do you like? And the reason that's important is because all of these small things keep getting thrown in our way that really distract us. We have the idea of the kissing moons. Maybe it's just been a while since I've read that part. I don't really remember it being gone into before. We have these things about, we have all these small details that distract us from the characters. The characters are why we're here. The characters are what we're doing in this world. We have the idea that Eldon and Leah had listened to the mermaid, right? All of these elements, these details, seem to just be thrown at us. Well, from a writing perspective, here is one of the better pieces of writing advice that I've ever read. Because you think about writing and you think about stories, and it's very easy to forget about revision. It's very easy to forget about rewriting. It's very easy to forget about drafts, second drafts, third drafts. Neil Gaiman said that of storytelling, write down everything that happens in the story, and then in the second draft, make it look like you knew what you were doing all along. Yeah, I don't think Stephen King ever went through this thing with a second draft. He probably polished some things up. He probably took out a character here or there, but that does not a second draft make. I don't think Stephen King ever went through this thing for a second draft because everything that we are reading feels like it's made up on the spot. And of course, it is the first time through a story. You are always writing the story as it comes to you. It's never supposed to feel that way. And I think that it feels that way because Stephen King never did go through and write a second draft that made it feel like he knew what he was doing the whole time. That's why all of these elements don't just come to us new, like the moons and the fairy tale, the mermaid, and all of these things. But that's also why when we get to other portions of the book, all the other stuff is forgotten. Charlie being an athlete, his father's drinking problem, none of that worked in. Wouldn't it be interesting if in Deep Meline they didn't have water, they just had liquor? And while imprisoned, Charlie, who had never drank because his father drank, and he saw how that was. Wouldn't it have been interesting if, during that time, Charlie had no option but to drink the liquor, and when he did, it made him aggressive, and he didn't question the decisions he was making the way he did while programmed from the world he had been to understand that good guys don't do those things. But in the new world, good guys do those things if they need to. Wouldn't that have been an interesting and complex twist on this story? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it would have sucked. That is all I have for this, the 27th episode in a 34-ish part series as we journey chapter by chapter through Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Again, if you want to help me out with what I'm doing here, hitting the like button does that. And I hope to have you along for every other episode in this series, no matter how much it seems like I'm not enjoying it.